This is ESG Decoded, the podcast powered by Climeco to provide relevant, actionable updates related to business innovation and sustainability. Join Kaitlyn Allen and Amanda Shea of Climeco for thoughtful, nuanced conversations with industry leaders that explore the complexities, the risks, and the opportunities connected to all things ESG. I'm Yvonne Harris, a consultant and a co-host, and I will be collaborating with Kaitlyn and Amanda for the discussions that we will present on this podcast. Put simply, ESG is everything that's not on your balance sheet. This leaves room for misunderstanding, oversimplification, and the tendency towards one-size-fits-all perspectives. None of that will happen on this podcast. Enjoy this episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to ESG Decoded. I'm your host, Kaitlyn Allen, and today we are talking with Meagan Knowlton of Optoro. We are really interested in companies that provide solutions to other companies' ESG problems or challenges, and so that's one of the reasons I've invited Optoro on. I think it's such an interesting company tackling a really huge problem that probably we're all guilty of contributing to, and that is online returns. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. Meagan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kaitlyn. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, I've been wanting to get Optoro on for a long time, so I'm really excited about this one. Let me just start by introducing Meagan. Meagan's the Director of Sustainability at Optoro, which is a returns technology company based in Washington, D.C. Meagan leads initiatives that enable retailers and brands to build circular business models and reduce waste and emissions in the reverse supply chain. And she will define what that is very soon. Prior to Optoro, Meagan managed sustainability programs in the Coca-Cola bottling system, where she focused on water, energy, and waste in manufacturing and logistics. Meagan holds a Master of Environmental Management from Duke University and a BS in Environmental Science from Tulane University. So that's a pretty awesome background, a very technical background. But before we get to the kind of meat of environmental, social governance issues in the reverse supply chain, let's start with a fun question. So what was your first job out of college?
Oh, great question, Kaitlyn. So during college and then afterward, so I'll call this answer A, I was working at a dessert shop and restaurant in New Orleans. And we had everything from gelato to cupcakes to macaroons to fancy coffees. So I was like that person wearing a little pinstripe pink shirt and like serving you brownies a la mode and macarons and lattes with latte art and things that I was kind of bad at. But it was so much fun. We got so many cool people coming through, you know, everybody from tourists to locals, lots of kids. So I loved that. And I got to eat so much dessert just constantly.
Fabulous.
And yes. And then, you know, I just kind of had to continue the dessert eating binge, I think. So my first thing out of college that counted as a job was going to do one of those programs that's an English teaching assistant program. So I wanted at least a year before I kind of got into my full long-term career, you know? So I signed up for this one that was in northern France and taught middle school students French for like a school year and just ate my way through northern France in terms of bread and butter and like I would just sit in my little tiny apartment and like slather a whole baguette with butter and jam, you know? It was wonderful.
That is fabulous. Oh, how fun. I think studying and working abroad is such a huge opportunity for personal development and also just that kind of fun. It's just so cool to experience different cultures and the food and
Yes. It was such a good opportunity to learn how people actually use the French language, you know, instead of doing it in an academic setting. So it was really challenging and, you know, and all of the kind of cultural differences that come from living in another country, of course, come up as well. But it was such a great learning experience for me, and a great way to find out that middle school kids are really kind of the same everywhere.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well,
Yeah.
thanks so much for sharing that, Megan. I always like to get to know guests a little bit on the personal side. And so next time I'm in DC, we will have to go grab some dessert.
We absolutely
Yes.
will. We can just
Yes.
talk through all of the things we wish we could know how to bake and other things we
Exactly.
are planning on baking.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, for context about our episode today, many of our guests may be familiar with the E and S, environmental and social issues for retail companies. And for retail companies, and that's really online, anyone that sells products online, I guess, maybe Megan has a different definition. That's kind of how I think of it. There is a very, very big, and I mean multi-billion-dollar returns problem. So people buying things online, which get shipped to them, and then wanting to return them also via shipping, and even in-store returns, right, contribute to the overstock problem. So it's not just online returns, but obviously the online ones have a very large environmental impact as well. And it is definitely one of the universe of ESG issues that retail companies are working to tackle. And Optoro is one of those solutions for that problem, helping to tackle that problem. So Megan, why don't we start by having you give a little bit of an overview of the big picture issue, and then telling us a little bit about what Optoro does.
Yeah, happy to jump right in. So, I think you're right. We're all familiar with retailers in the sense that, unless you're living completely off the grid in a forest somewhere, we all are consumers in some way. We all buy from retailers, and that can be anything from a grocery store to Walmart to luxury fashion and everything in between. So when we look at retail returns, my forte is U.S. retail returns, and only in terms of these stats that I'm going to share. So in 2021, so last year, there were about $760 billion worth of returns in the US. And now that was a huge jump from the year before, where it was about 428 billion. So you jumped from 428 to around 760 billion. The actual number was 761, it looks like. And that comes from the National Retail Federation. Some of that jump wasn't just because returns grew significantly, though that was part of it. The other part was simply, we believe, data collection to really better understand how e-commerce returns work, as well as better capturing what the retail returns landscape looks like for the apparel and kind of soft goods sides of the industry. So what we're looking at here is that e-commerce returns tend to have, it can be 3 times, it can be 5 times the amount of returns of your traditional in-person brick and mortar returns. So when you think about it as a consumer, that feels right for how we shop and how we return our behaviors as well, right? So, whether it's because in person we can really touch things, look at them, figure out whether the specifications are what we're looking for in the case of, say, electronics, versus, clothing, you can touch it, try it on, feel it, see how the color looks and everything like that in person. So you're more likely to hold on to that item. You bought it kind of knowing what it is and if it's going to fit the use case you need. Meanwhile, online, we don't have as good an understanding of whether this product is truly meeting the needs that we're looking for. And in particular, that's true for apparel and certain types of home goods, say a pillow or sheets or a mattress, that kind of thing. So in particular for apparel and footwear, I mean, you can see return rates of up to around 30% of the goods that are bought get returned. Some of that is also because of what we call bracketing, which is those of us who buy multiple products at a time, assuming that one of them isn't going to fit or one of them isn't the color we want. So say I want to buy a new swimsuit, I'll buy 3, planning on only keeping 1, just so I can try them on and then return 2. That's called bracketing. It is something that retailers know their customers do and want to try to reduce, frankly, because that ends up creating more of these returns that retailers then have to figure out what to do with. But I will also caveat that with, retailers aren't going to be able to stop returns. Those of us who prefer to buy online, and online shopping has, jumped significantly in the last couple of years, in particular because of the pandemic, and it's not slowing down. Retailers want us to be able to be repeat customers and to be happy with the products we have. So if that means some of us want to buy multiples at a time and return some, they understand that. So there's this huge imperative for retailers to offer free or cheap, very convenient returns, and to continue engaging customers to have a positive returns experience with that, right? And so with that in mind, retailers end up getting all of these returns back from their customers, and they don't necessarily always know what to do with them. So here's where we get to kind of the crux of the matter, what the issue is with returns. I don't know about you, but before I started working at Optoro, this was like 3.5 years ago, I thought if I returned a product, they would just sell it, right? They'd get it back, they'd put it back to stock, and they'd sell it to the next person. But that's not always the case. So when you think of a retailer, think of a company that is really good at designing or buying products, selling them, and distributing them. Their forward supply chain is what they're really good at least historically. It's only in the last couple of years, frankly, that retailers are realizing, oh gosh, we have to figure out what to do to get products back to us when they're excess, overstock, shelf pulls, display items, and of course, returns. So I'm talking about everything kind of in the reverse landscape. And that's what I mean by reverse logistics. It's the products that come back to a retailer or that didn't get sold or that are returned, that kind of thing. So they end up with all of these products. It takes a lot of time and effort to look at these products and figure out whether they can be sold again or not. You have to open every single box, inspect every single one, take the time and energy and space in a warehouse to have all of these individually boxed items and then take a look at them. And then from there, have the technology to either post them back online to your e-commerce store or sell them to a secondary marketplace online, picture eBay, or send them to an in-person, outlet store or an off-price store like say TJ Maxx, or, get it to a liquidator or get it to a flea market. And because all of that takes so much time and so much human power and resources to do it, it's often historically cheaper for a retailer to just liquidate all of that inventory. So they've got all of these returns stacking up in a corner in the warehouse, and they're like, oh my God, this stuff is here. We don't have the time or space for it anymore. Get it out of the warehouse. Hey, liquidator, can you come fill up a couple truckloads? We'll give it to you really, really cheap. And because it's so cheap, the liquidator isn't really incentivized to do anything to harness the most value from it possible. So it's possible that they're going to end up exporting a lot of it, or some of it will end up in landfill, and many combinations thereof. So it really, this issue of returns, we want to try to empower the retailers and brands that we work with to speed up that returns processing process, really be able to harness the value of those products that they otherwise might not make any money on, and keep them out of landfills by finding the next best home for each and every item versus grouping them all together, where some might have been new and could have gone back online to their store. Some might need to get donated or refurbished. And if you're not processing them at the item level or the unit level, then you're not going to be able to really do that. So that's where Optoro comes in. So I know I just gave a long spiel, but I'll also, I think I referenced some big stats. So part of my job as our sustainability person at Optoro is really quantifying the size of the returns problem in the US. So I mentioned earlier, there was this huge jump from 2020 to 2021 in the value of returns in the US. In 2021, that amount of returns was equivalent to about 27 million metric tons of carbon emissions, which is equivalent to almost 6 million cars driven over the course of 1 year. And then in terms of waste to landfills, we estimated that it was just under 10 billion pounds of returns went to landfills in 2021. And to give you an idea,
My jaw is dropping for people that can't see us.
right? To give you a picture of what that looks like in terms of waste, that's about 10,500 fully loaded Boeing 747s. So wildness, so much waste. And then of course there's the waste in terms of, human time and effort and the hours spent and the money spent on logistics, getting products, moved around in this super inefficient reverse supply chain. So that's where we come in to try to help solve the problem.
I'm going to just restate.
Yeah, go
so
ahead.
the equivalent of 10,500 fully loaded 747s
Yes, is the amount of
goes
waste.
to landfill.
Yes, from returns in the
Landfill.
US.
So new things that we have sent back to the retailer, brand new products are,
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
It's wild.
Yeah.
Completely nonsensical. Wow.
Yeah. And sometimes, what's tough is if you take a product out of its original packaging, or it doesn't have a tag anymore, or it has like a small stain on it or something like that, it's really tough for the people in this warehouse who are getting the products back and are in charge of processing it to take the time and effort. And sometimes they don't even have the tools they need to handle all of those products, If, say, in the case of apparel, you might need to clean it properly, and that's really expensive and time consuming.
Yeah. Well, I think those of you who know, I also have a startup in this space called Mend It. I'm very passionate about this problem, but I had not heard the 10,500 fully loaded 747 stat. So please bring me back from the brink of despair. Please tell me what Optoro is doing to help this problem. Okay, go ahead. Go right ahead, please.
Totally. Well,
save my mental sanity here.
Kaitlyn, I love that you brought up Mend It, though, because that's exactly the type of solution that I think is part of the whole network that needs to come together to really help make the reverse supply chain less wasteful. We need all hands on deck and all kinds of solutions working together to offer better solutions for consumers and for retailers. So, yours, I think, is something where consumers can interact and can say, yes, I'm going to take charge of this, not contribute to waste, and make this product work for me by getting it, tailored to my specifications instead of just sending it back because it was a little long or whatever. So what Optoro does is we kind of think of ourselves as the full returns solution for retailers and brands. So, there are kind of three core ways that we work with returns. The first is in a returns platform or a portal. So that's like, for e-commerce returns, anytime you've ever made a return online, right? You go to their website, you click, okay, make a return, and it brings you to a little portal where you put in your order number and, maybe your zip code or your name or whatever. And it brings up, oh, here's your order. Would you like to return this? Okay, why would you like to return it? Okay, would you like to print out a label? Would you like a QR code? All of that. So we have a portal that allows retailers, customers to initiate their returns. It's fully personalized, so you never feel like you're leaving the retailer's website. And what's cool about this one is that we can direct customers to drop off their returns without a box or without a label to Staples stores in the US. So where you might not have a printer and don't want to print out your return, or you lost the box that the product came in, you can just walk into a Staples store, show them the QR code on your phone, and drop off your item. And what I love about that and solutions like this, you can see similar programs. For example, I know I can bring an Amazon return without its box to Whole Foods. So similar type of program. What I love about it is that then behind the counter, they're consolidating all of these returned products into like one big box. And then that one big box with consolidated returns from all over the place. And in our case, it's returns from multiple retailers and brands. They're all going in there. They're saving space because they're not individually boxed. They're all together in one box. And then you can consolidate that shipment of returns back to a warehouse where then they can get processed from there and sent to their next best home or to a retailer's warehouse, that kind of thing. And what I love about these consolidated returns programs as well is that you are giving customers a chance to really personalize how they're returning to their retailers, and they're getting a better experience from it, and for retailers, what they want is to provide the best experience through the entire buying and returning journey so that they can keep getting repeat customers. And for me, I know if have a bad returns experience with a retailer, I might be super unlikely to shop with them again. So this is part of why, we're trying to pair the sustainability program, as in reducing carbon emissions, reducing waste from packaging, with kind of the financial benefit for retailers, which is cutting on some of the shipping costs, as well as getting them repeat happy customers. So, all the ESG work in trying to pair sustainability with the financial benefit, of course. Now, the next kind of key place where we're doing the same thing, trying to pair financial with sustainability, is really the core of our work, which is in processing returns. So we manage returns through a technology system as well as directly in our warehouses that is AI powered. And this technology can be held on a handheld device, about the size of an iPhone, I guess. And it automates the receiving of these packages that come into warehouses. And then from that, warehouse workers will use the handheld device to sort products depending on where they go to their next best homes. So I'll physically have my handheld device, I'll scan a returned item that comes in, and then the device tells me right away, using a set of business rules and data on pricing and where that product can go, and AI-backed information on, how that product might sell elsewhere. It'll tell that warehouse worker right away, okay, this product can get resold on a secondary marketplace. You need to go put it over there in that box. We think it'll resell for this much. And from there, then, that product gets sorted there and it can automatically fulfill from wherever that return got received, which is critical too in cutting out the carbon emissions, because a good amount of the time, retailers' forward fulfillment distribution centers are different from their returns distribution centers. So what we're trying to do is cut back on the number of different warehouses that products have to ship around to before they can get into the hands of the next end user. And we're also trying to add reuse channels. We're trying to power reuse for retailers. So instead of their only options being either liquidation or landfill, what we're trying to do is power returning to stock what they can, returning to vendor where appropriate, for listing on secondary marketplaces, as well as building donation, refurbishment, and recycling partnerships as well. And that's kind of where I come in, is on the stuff that needs to avoid end of life, but could get reused elsewhere or could get taken apart and recycled elsewhere. And then finally, the kind of third core part of what we do is in the re-commerce space or the resale space. So we can list directly to resale marketplaces, to a retailer's own marketplace, like an online outlet, or we list directly on eBay or any number of others, including our own bulk resale marketplace called bulk.com.
Okay, so I, as a consumer, can go to bulk.com to buy things that would have otherwise been possibly landfilled or liquidated directly from Optoro.
That's correct, or directly from our partners,
Gotcha.
facilities as well. And what's interesting about bulk.com is BULQ, if anybody's curious. It has kind of a cult following. So it's a marketplace for people who are trying to either have a side hustle or a full-time hustle in reselling. So it's a marketplace for resellers. So think of the people whose job, either part-time or full-time, is selling goods on eBay. They're the people who are coming to bulk.com, but anybody can do it. You don't have to be specially licensed or anything to do it. So you could go on there right now and buy a case or a pallet of products that were returns or excess inventory, and you can see a full listing of all of the products in there. And that's really the key differentiator for us, is that because we're using our technology to scan everything and to have item by item visibility, we know exactly what's in that box. And so you can go on bulk.com, buy it, and then try your hand at resale on Facebook Marketplace or eBay or flea markets or garage sales or however else you would like to do it. So that's really what we're trying to do, is get products into kind of that resale network as best we can. Because, generally, if you can get an item to sell for its highest value, you have a higher likelihood of knowing that product is getting reused. If it's just getting, sent somewhere and donated, if you donated it, especially to an organization that doesn't have great visibility, they might not be super incentivized to reuse everything. Now, so there are so many nonprofits and charities that are in need of good inventory. So we do work with so many nonprofits on distributing goods to people. And in particular, when you think about home goods, there's so many things that can go to people who just don't have the means to buy things that they might need for their home. So we work with a couple big home goods retailers, and that's kind of one example where I never really thought about it in the past, but now, I'm in the home goods and other inventory donation business.
Yeah, this is so interesting. I mean, I think this is one of the things that, in general, we in the, say, quote, developed world, right, or the quote, Western world or global North, we don't see our waste. We don't see what happens to our stuff and the things that we throw away, donate, or return. And because we don't see it and we assume it's being taken care of by, I don't know, the fairies. I mean, theoretically, we're paying our city to haul our waste or whatever, but we assume it's all fine. But actually, there's this whole other world of reverse supply chain and donation industry, which is an industry really, and all of these things that we don't necessarily see. And I think the more people that become aware of that, I think we'll hopefully become a little bit more thoughtful about what we buy and how we return or dispose of it. And so it makes me interested too to know kind of some of who your key customers are, because I'm curious who's partnering with Optoro, because it makes me feel a little bit better about returning things that I might need to return. So could you tell us a little bit about some of your clients, if you can, and then some of maybe the successes that you've had with different retailers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Kaitlyn. I think it's so true what you said about trying to be a little bit more mindful about what we buy. Consumers play such a huge role in this issue. And, in my mind, it's just trying to be a little bit more conscious of how we buy things, or more intentional. I think one key area that is easier, a good starting place for me, is how I buy gifts for people. Trying to be very intentional with getting something that either we know without a doubt they're going to use because they put it on a list or a registry, or because I know them really well and I heard them say they needed this thing last week or whatever. Being able to give thoughtfully is critical. I think also just trying to kind of decouple our lifestyles and our economy from the buying of things is such a huge concept that that is probably a separate conversation altogether. But, for example, when I talk about sustainable shopping, sometimes I'm looking for consumables, or I'm looking for experiences, right? Like if I'm giving somebody something, I'm looking for those. But to circle back to your question about who we work with and how. So, so we work with, major enterprise retailers, as well as some of the online specific brands and retailers as well. So some examples of the ones we work with are everybody from Best Buy to Target, Staples, a lot of home goods, as I mentioned. So IKEA in the US is one we work with. And then I also get to dive into my love of fashion and apparel with a number of our clients, including American Eagle and their set of brands. And so, we do kind of a diverse range of things for them. So, sometimes our clients are sending us products to our warehouses. They say, we want you to fully manage returns for us in the US. We don't want to have to handle them. We're really good at forward sales and distribution. Can you handle returns? So we take in their returns. We use our technology. We resell for them, or we'll list back to stock online for them, that kind of thing. We can act as a drop shipper, which you may have heard that phrase before. For a typical person who doesn't really work in retail or logistics, might not know what drop shipping is. So it's essentially, sometimes you order something online and that product isn't actually coming necessarily from, say, Target's warehouse. It might actually come from a third party's warehouse that's one of their partners. And I actually think, I was just shopping on Target's website the other day, and I actually think I saw they said, this item will come from our partner, blah, blah, blah. So they were really transparent about it, which I thought was really cool. So yeah, so we can send directly stuff back to stock for our partner clients, and we don't have to ship it around back to their warehouse so that it can get listed online and to somebody else. So we can do that, or we have our technology that can get implemented in any place, in any warehouse or in stores. So we have clients who will say, we're a big company, we have huge distribution facilities, and we handle our own returns, but we are looking for a technology solution to speed up that processing and to better track data on it. And so, we want to save some of the logistics time in our warehouse, make it and try to get more money, more recovered value on the dollar for the goods that got returned or that were overstocked. So they'll use our technology and we'll implement it in their own warehouses as well. So kind of a whole network there. And, we're really trying to grow our returns network across the US, including those returns drop-offs I mentioned in Staples stores. And, of course, there are a number of other retailers I work with that I can't mention, but what's so fun for me in my sustainability day-to-day life is when the partners we work with say, okay, we've worked with you guys, we're implementing returns management, we're implementing everything with you, and now we need to find another way to get the products better optimized so that more stuff can get diverted from landfill. And so that's my bread and butter. So I do all kinds of data analysis for them, identifying what is getting sorted through our technology to a recycle or dispose, and then what can we divert from there to donations or recycling or refurbishment. And then, we can help them set up partnerships if they don't already have them with, those kind of quote end of life partners, and try to find solutions that make sense financially as well as for the planet and in line with, their social goals as well. So I love that because we get to contribute to their kind of sustainability agendas while also pairing it on to a solution that's, better tracking data on what's going where.
Yeah, no, this is so interesting. And like I said, it's just one of those parts of life that most people don't ever think about. And it's sort of like electricity, actually. There's a lot of people who never think about where the electricity comes from too, or their water for that matter. But I think it's so illuminating to hear kind of about this entire different world on the sort of the back end, I guess, or the sort of reverse end. Yeah, it's so interesting. So do you have any other kind of fun stats to share in terms of emissions? I mean, I know you're deep in data every day. Any other kind of fun points you want to drop on us?
Fun points. I mean,
well,
I guess
fun. I don't know if it's fun. Learning about the 10,000 pretty
fun. Yeah. I will say, kind of my big happy place is in quantifying, the impact that we have with our partners every year. And so every year we work toward helping them reuse as many products as possible, right? So sending to a resale or donation or whatever channel. And so I will, we always work toward at least a 95% reuse goal. So that means less than 5% of the products that are getting scanned through Optoro's platform show up as saying that they were scanned to dispose. So the rest would go to dispose or recycle, excuse me. I consider recycle a disposal channel. And so, the rest are getting sent to like donations or resale or some kind of reuse, usually resale or return to vendor donation. So yeah, I don't know about fun.
That's heartening. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it is a little bit heartening though, because it makes me feel better about shopping at Target.
Yeah. Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
at least if I mean, there's certain things, I mean, I have kids, there's just certain things, it's just so easy and convenient, which is, yeah, again, we have to make all the other options easy and convenient. That's what we're going to amend it, but it does kind of make you feel better. So the chances that your returned product, say at Target or IKEA in the US, I think you mentioned Staples, American Eagle, Best Buy, the chances that those things returned go to landfill is actually around 5% of the time, right? So I don't know if I'm
Sure. Yeah,
fitting the stat well, but
yeah, it's an
is that true?
aggregate number.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Okay.
aggregate across all clients. So of course, each
Right. Okay.
program is going to be a little bit different, but and I'd say, yeah, you're spot on in terms of trying to be more conscious about finding retailers and shopping from retailers who talk about their sustainability journey. And something I'd recommend as consumers, as we are all consumers, is trying to find whether retailers talk about the circular economy at all. And we haven't really gotten into that much here, though I'm sure listeners of this podcast are familiar with the concept. But I would say that one of the kind of core ways that we achieve value for the clients we work with is in the circular economy space, prolonging the useful life of products, keeping products out of landfills, and trying to reuse the materials and products that are already in the market. So if you're, wondering whether a retailer that you shop with is committed at all to keeping products out of landfills, a good place to start might be thinking about whether they talk about either sustainability or about circular economy, and really using a critical eye. If a retailer says, we care about sustainability, so we want most of our products to be made of recycled PET, that doesn't necessarily mean that they also care about what happens at the end of life of their products. So just being kind of a critical researcher on the brands that you shop with is great. Another great trend that's occurring right now is resale. I'm sure we've all seen the number of brands and retailers that we work with that are launching resale programs left and right, usually online, saying, hey, come buy this refurbished or returned product, and you can get some store credit, or you can buy it directly from us and then resell it once you're done with it. So I love that type of program too. I guess the other piece from the consumer angle that I would urge folks to think about is, when you think you need to make a return, try to make that return as quickly as possible, because most retail products have some kind of inherent seasonality associated with them. It makes it much more difficult, much more unlikely to resell a product if it's out of season. And, depending on the retailer, seasons can be a month long, it can be a couple weeks long, in terms of fast fashion. So I'd say within the month, if you can try to return it as quickly as possible, that's really where you're going to empower the retailer to be more likely to get it to return to stock, meaning more likely in the hands of a consumer. Mm-hmm. And then, also just trying as best you can to keep it in its original packaging, to keep it looking as fresh as possible. I mean, that's really going to enhance the ability of the retailer to resell it.
You mentioned the fast fashion business model and the very rapid seasons. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that from a returns perspective as well. Obviously, I'm really interested in that problem. How do you make that how do you change that business model? Basically, it's not obvious. There's a lot of work being done on that. And I was just going to add one other resource for listeners is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that is working to build a circular economy. And they have a really cool initiative called Make Fashion Circular. So a lot of those retailers there are, some of whom I think you've mentioned possibly, are at least committed to working on the problem and putting resources toward trying to tackle this. So yeah, all really, really interesting. And, sometimes as an individual, you can feel like there's nothing I can do. And there definitely are small choices that do help the bigger picture. And I know all of us, and probably everyone listening to the podcast, wants to know ways that they can, be part of the solution, or at least be part of making the problem less bad, right? So
Yes.
I really appreciate you sharing all of those resources for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the one last thing I would leave you with, if I can give a piece of advice, is
Please.
getting into, you probably already do this, Kaitlyn, but is getting into, buying secondhand or buying open box. I'm not always a big fan of going into clothing thrift stores myself. I'm not one of those people that's obsessed with the hunt, but I love the hunt online. So, I love to buy electronics and home goods secondhand or open box. And there are so many places online you can go. It includes those marketplaces we already mentioned, like IKEA and Facebook Marketplace, as well as online outlets for places like Williams Sonoma, or you can go in person, like IKEA has their as is section, which I love. You can find the products already built over there and they're discounted. And it's like my favorite part of the IKEA store. So you can do those kinds of things. And as I mentioned, of course, like so many of the apparel brands nowadays have resale available online, either through their websites, or you can go to places like Poshmark or ThreadUp and, get really sweet deals, as well as, contributing to a more circular economy. So instead of buying new, you're buying something that already existed in the market.
And I think those are the signals too that go back to corporate of, there is demand for this. And, going back to corporate ESG, right? The being able to show that there is a desire from customers to have these programs in place. And we show that by voting with our dollar, right? And by supporting those programs and making purchases there. And that just kind of all goes back to corporate as good evidence that investing in these types of programs is worthwhile. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And regulation may come. We've got
true.
extended producer responsibility regulations that are quite related to keeping, retail products out of landfill, at least in the EU. So time will tell if it comes, something like it comes to US for all retail products other than the ones that are already out there, like tires and carpets and
totally.
that kind of thing.
There's definitely a regulatory risk involved, and just, makes the case even sweeter that it's good for business.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I feel like we could go on a long time and go deeper into a lot of these issues. But for now, I just really thank you for joining us. As you know, I'm a big fan of Optoro, and I think it's a really interesting business. So really grateful to have had you on today.
Of course. Thank you so much, Kaitlyn. This was so fun. We always have fun chatting, and I can't wait till we can hang in person and catch up over some pastries.
Eat pastry, yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Thank you for listening to ESG Decoded. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you consume yours, and follow ESG Decoded and ClimbCo across social media platforms. Until our next episode, take what you learned today to drive long-term value for your organization by doing good for people and the planet.